Let me ask you something real quick. How many of you wake up and the first thing you touch is your phone? Yeah, that little rectangle of dopamine and distraction, and before you even stand up, you've already handed control of your day to emails, notifications, and other people's priorities. Here's the truth most people don't want to hear. Your life isn't stuck. Your mornings are weak. And if you fix your mornings, you don't just change your day, you change your identity. So today, I'm going to give you 3 things to do every single morning that will radically shift how you think, act, and perform. Not someday, not when you feel ready, starting tomorrow morning. Win the day isn't just a catchy line. It's a law of human behavior. The first moments after you wake up are when your brain is most suggestible, most open to patterns, and most vulnerable to habits. Whatever you do in that window quietly sets the tone for how you think, act, and respond for the rest of the day. That's why mornings aren't about productivity hacks or fancy routines, they're about identity. What you do first becomes who you become because your brain is constantly collecting evidence to answer one question: who am I? If the first thing you do in the morning is hit snooze, you're training yourself to delay when things get uncomfortable. If you wake up and immediately check your phone, you're reinforcing the idea that other people's priorities matter more than your own. Over time, these tiny actions stack up and form a self-image you didn't consciously choose. You don't suddenly become undisciplined or unfocused. You rehearse those traits every single morning without realizing it. The opposite is also true. When you wake up with intention, even in small ways, you begin to rewrite that internal narrative. Getting out of bed when your mind tells you to stay comfortable sends a powerful signal that you are someone who takes control. Choosing to think before you consume, to move before you scroll, or to act before you hesitate builds evidence that you are disciplined, capable, and self-directed. Your confidence doesn't come from hype or motivation. It comes from watching yourself do hard things consistently, especially when no one is watching. Mornings are powerful because they are uncontested. The world hasn't made its demands yet. No emails, no opinions, no chaos. That quiet space is where you either claim ownership of your life or unconsciously give it away. When you win the morning, you're not trying to dominate the entire day, you're simply setting the direction. And direction matters more than speed. A day that starts with clarity and control will almost always outperform a day that starts with reaction and distraction. Over time, this compounds. One intentional morning becomes a week. A week becomes a standard becomes an identity, and once your identity shifts, your actions no longer require force. They flow naturally from who you believe you are. Control your mind before the world does, because the moment you wake up, forces are already competing for your attention. Notifications, news, expectations, comparisons, and noise are waiting to tell you what matters, what to fear, and how you should feel. If you step into the day without intention, you don't choose your mindset, you inherit it. And most people don't realize they're mentally reacting all day long because they never paused to decide who they wanted to be before the chaos began. Your mind is not neutral. It is either being trained or it is being hijacked. When you allow the first input of your day to be social media, messages, or problems, you're giving external forces permission to set your emotional baseline. That's how anxiety sneaks in, how comparison takes root, and how self-doubt quietly becomes familiar. It's not because you're weak, it's because you never set the frame. The world is incredibly good at pulling your focus outward, and once your attention is scattered, your energy follows it. Setting your mindset early is about choosing your internal environment before the external one crashes in. It means deciding what deserves your emotional response and what doesn't. Fear thrives in uncertainty and passivity, so when you start your day with clarity, fear loses its grip. You remind yourself what you're working toward, what problems are worth solving, and what opinions don't get a vote in your life. That act alone creates psychological armor. You stop being easily shaken because you're anchored to something deeper than the moment. Distractions don't disappear when you become disciplined. You simply become faster at recognizing them. By setting your mindset early, you sharpen your awareness. You notice when your thoughts drift toward excuses, when your focus fractures, when negativity tries to slip in wearing the mask of realism. Instead of being pulled along, you correct course. That ability doesn't come from willpower later in the day, it comes from rehearsal in the morning. Other people's opinions only have power when you haven't decided who you are. When your values are unclear, validation becomes addictive. But when you take time early to define your standards and priorities, feedback becomes information instead of identity. You can listen without collapsing, adjust without shrinking, and move forward without constantly looking over your shoulder. That's what mental control really looks like, not forcing positive thoughts, but choosing deliberate ones before the world starts choosing for you. Do the hard thing first because hesitation is where momentum goes to die. The longer you wait to face discomfort, the bigger it becomes in your mind. Your brain is wired to protect you, not to push you toward growth, so it will always offer a more comfortable alternative. When you delay the hard thing, you're not avoiding pain, you're extending it. The task doesn't disappear, it just gains weight, and that mental weight drains your energy before you've even begun. Momentum is not something you find, it's something you create through action. And the fastest way to create it is by choosing discomfort early. When you do the hardest task first, you send a message to yourself that resistance does not control your behavior. That single decision shifts your internal posture. You stop negotiating with excuses and start operating from standards. The rest of the day feels lighter, not because the work is easier, but because you've already proven to yourself that you can handle pressure. Motivation is unreliable because it depends on mood, environment, and emotion. Some days it shows up, most days it doesn't. Discipline, on the other hand, grows stronger every time you act without feeling ready. Each time you do the hard thing first, you reinforce the identity of someone who follows through. That identity compounds. You don't need hype. You don't need perfect conditions. You don't need to feel inspired. You move because that's who you are. Over time, that consistency outperforms bursts of motivation every single time. Discomfort is often misunderstood as a signal to stop, but in reality, it's a signal that you're expanding. The people who get ahead aren't more fearless. They're just more willing to act while uncomfortable. By leaning into the hard thing early, you train your nervous system to stay calm under pressure. Stress becomes familiar instead of overwhelming. Challenges feel manageable instead of paralyzing. That resilience doesn't come from theory, it comes from repetition. When you start your day by conquering resistance, you carry that confidence forward. Decisions become clearer, focus sharpens, you trust yourself more because you've already kept a promise to yourself. Discipline doesn't just improve productivity, it builds self-respect, and self-respect changes how you show up in every area of your life. The hard thing is rarely the problem. The real problem is letting comfort decide the direction of your life. Consistency beats intensity because real progress is built quietly, not in dramatic bursts. Intensity feels powerful in the moment. It's exciting, emotional, and makes you feel like you're finally changing your life. But intensity without consistency fades fast. It relies on motivation, and motivation is temporary. When the feeling disappears, so does the effort. Consistency, on the other hand, doesn't care how you feel. It shows up on good days, bad days, and days when nothing seems to be working. Small actions done daily may feel insignificant, but they are shaping you whether you notice it or not. Every repeated behavior is a vote for the kind of person you are becoming. One workout doesn't transform your body, one focused session doesn't master a skill, and one disciplined morning doesn't change your life. But repeating those actions again and again rewires your habits, your confidence, and your standards. The power isn't in the size of the action, it's in the frequency. People often quit because they expect immediate results. When progress is slow, they assume it isn't working. What they don't realize is that consistency compounds invisibly at first. Just like interest in a bank account, the early stages don't look impressive. But over time, the curve bends upward. The results that look like overnight success are usually the outcome of months or years of small, boring, disciplined actions that no one applauded. Consistency also removes decision fatigue. When something becomes a daily standard instead of a dramatic effort, it requires less mental energy. You stop asking whether you feel like doing it and start asking how well you're going to do it. That shift frees up focus and builds momentum. Your actions become automatic and your progress becomes inevitable. Intensity often leads to burnout because it demands too much too fast. Consistency is sustainable. It respects reality. It allows you to improve while still living your life. When you miss a day, consistency pulls you back instead of letting guilt push you away. Over time, this approach builds trust with yourself. You stop making big promises and start keeping small ones. That trust is powerful because it changes how you see yourself. Massive results are rarely the product of massive actions. They are the result of ordinary actions repeated long enough to become extraordinary. Consistency doesn't shout, it whispers, and if you listen long enough, it changes everything.